Hello and welcome to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
Hello, welcome from rainy Napa Valley. The weather's quite unfriendly today unless you're a duck.
Right.
But we have a beautiful view here, and I'm at Silverado Vineyards with Jon Emmerich, whose wines I've been fortunate enough to try quite a bit over the years. And we're going to get to know him personally and professionally. So we'll start at the very beginning, which is, are you originally from California?
I am, yes. I'm a native Californian.
Perfect. And where were you born?
So born in the San Francisco Bay Area, on the peninsula in Redwood City, before Redwood City became Redwood City, right?
Uh-huh. And then what was you grew up in the Bay Area, and I know you wound up in UC Davis, so why did you choose that school?
So I graduated high school, Sequoia High School, in 1981, and at the time I was given basically a choice. My folks basically said to me, okay, look, you are going to college, we're going to pay for college, but we're not going to really send you to a private school. So there are great state schools, either state or UC. So I started looking in catalogs. And at the time, the Davis, or I should say the UC system, a number of the schools were really getting impacted. And so they basically said, the deal was, you know, if you had the grades, the SATs, you were guaranteed to get into one school, but it may not be your first choice. You had to list the top three. And they were really trying to fill up, at the time, like UC Riverside and UC Irvine. And I was a Bay Area kid, and I really didn't want to go down to Southern California. So I looked in the catalog at UC Davis, found Fermentation Science, and said to myself, hey, you know, if I apply for a program that's only offered at one UC school, they've got to accept me. And I got accepted pretty early on the program, and thinking, you know, you could change your major, right?
Sure.
That's happened before in college. Got to Davis in the fall. Serendipity takes over. I end up being in a dorm across from very nice young man who family had a winery in Lodi. School starting in fall. Harvest is in fall. Lodi is about 40 minutes from Davis. He had asked a number of folks on the floor, hey, if you want to come out and give us a hand, we'd love to have the help. Went out there and just kind of fell in love with it. Brought grapes back, and we made wine in the dorms in a 55-gallon garbage can, and that was the rest, as they say, is history, right?
What was that emotional connection like? You said you fell in love. What is it about the wine when you first kind of laid eyes on it?
I don't think it's so much actually like the intoxication, you know, that part of it. I think when you fall in love, I think for me it's more of a making process. It's the process of getting from point A to B. And I honestly think if you talk to most winemakers, they enjoy their product and they're very proud of what they're doing. But I really think that we're process focused, and we're just thrilled about the process and trying to make it a better process. Because think about it, you're growing something and you're taking this product that you've grown and whatever input you're putting in, and then you create this beautiful product at the end. That's really intoxicating, literally. Right?
Yeah, because you have so much impact.
Yeah, you really do. Even if you're, you know, low intervention, you're still impacting what's going on.
Oh, well put. So your original major became what? Fermentation Science, viticulture?
Right. My degree is actually in Fermentation Science. What's interesting about the program at Davis, and it could be very different now, but at the time it basically had three disciplines. It was winemaking, beer making, and then food fermentation. So in the food fermentation, which I actually thought was really fascinating, you had like yogurts and cheeses and soy sauces, kimchi, things like that, tea. Of course, beer is beer, and at the time there weren't quite as many craft breweries out there, but the brewmaster was the world's best brewmaster, and then of course winemaking.
Yeah.
So I focused on winemaking.
Yeah.
And like I said, here I am in Napa.
Yeah. So after graduation, did you wind up staging in Napa? Or?
So during the school year at Davis, I had done 2 internships, one in France in the Cognac region, and I was there for about 6 months working and traveling. The following year, I worked at a small winery in Half Moon Bay called Obester Winery, which doesn't exist anymore. Paul and Sandy sold the winery. So I did that kind of, basically in fall, and so I missed a couple of classes, came back, picked up those classes, graduated, and came to Napa. I mean, again, that was 1987. So I mean, I took a few years longer than most folks to get out of school. But again, the landscape was so different in 1987 than it is now. Just looking at the areas where they make wine, I mean, so many of those areas obviously made wine, but they weren't as well known.
Absolutely.
And so you're looking at a map, you're a fermentation science wine person, where are you going to go? You're either going to probably go to Napa, Sonoma, maybe Mendocino.
Yeah.
Right? Central Coast wasn't really what it is today. The foothills weren't, Oregon and Washington were obviously making wines, but not to the extent and notoriety. Santa Barbara, of course, existed, but again, they just weren't as well known.
Yeah.
So I did my first post-degree harvest at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars.
Yeah.
And then went to Con Creek Winery. Then over to Sebastiani, and then here, and started at Silverado Vineyards February of 1990. So this coming harvest will be harvest 30.
My goodness. And it's such an unusual journey in a sense that, as you pointed out, Napa has changed dramatically since 87, and exponentially, I would say. And the typical scenario for a winemaker is to work for a number of brands throughout their career. In fact, there are winemakers that consult for dozens.
Correct.
You chose, you started your career, working with a couple of renowned brands, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, of course, iconic brand, and Con Creek as well. But then you settled here and you stayed. And again, I cannot emphasize enough, I can count on one hand the winemakers that stayed with a single brand throughout the career. So really interested to hear how that happened. And
first of all, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? We are estate fruit, which I think has a big play, because we are basically controlling our own destiny here. So and so that has a lot to do with it. We're family owned. We're owned by this really wonderful family, the Miller family, and they really had this model where they were not building this winery to satisfy some sort of ego on their part. They just wanted to make a really beautiful product. And so they brought the folks in that had the expertise. So we've always had a general manager and a winemaking team and a sales force, and they really were more or less hands off to a degree. I mean, they cared very much about the product, and the day-to-day was not run by the family, and so we have an incredible amount of autonomy. And the bottom line is just make a great product, and we do, and so they're happy.
What a terrific situation.
It's a great situation, and then we've been able to assemble a really great production team. My associate winemaker, Ilona, has been here. This will be her 25th harvest. So between Ilona and I, we've been together for 25 years here, and that's probably pretty unusual as well.
Indeed. I had no idea that your assistant winemaker has such a
associate
long...
winemaker,
Oh my goodness, associate, pardon me. So you're only the second winemaker of record for the brand.
Correct. Okay. Yeah.
And your first official head winemaker vintage, or I should say year, 98 vintage would be,
Right, yes.
So this is really your home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've spent most of my adult life at Silverado Vineyards.
Yes.
And I met my wife here as well. So, it's a very, very special place. There are not a lot of places, I think, in the Valley this day and age that are like this situation. There's a handful of family-owned, high-quality estate fruit. I could think of 3 or 4 offhand, and not a lot more.
No, it really lends itself, to doing some very special things, because you can do it at your own pace. You have the resources.
Correct.
And you have quite a large property, which we'll talk about in a second, so you can certainly study different pieces of it and take the time and be able to really make it flourish.
Right. Well, the other thing which I will mention as well, so we contract our farming. We work with a farming company called their name Wahlstrom Vineyard Management.
Okay.
And we've actually been working with them since 1988.
Wow, that's another long-term relationship.
Yeah, so you have these long-term relationships with your farming company, so they know the vineyards intimately. You have Ilona and I that understand the vineyards and the winemaking process.
Yeah. And
you put all that together, and it's a great story. Oh. And it's real and it's authentic.
Yeah.
And it's hard to match that.
Yeah, I would say probably impossible as I think about it, especially in current iteration of the Napa Valley, where it isn't historically in terms of land acquisition and such. So how many acres do you have? Right,
so planted, it's roughly 400 acres planted, spread out amongst 6, I would say, very distinctive vineyard sites.
And they're all in Stag's Leap? Or?
No. So the home ranch where the winery is located is about 100 acres fully planted. That's Stag's Leap. Mm-hmm. The first vineyard, which is our Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, first vineyard that the Millers purchased in '76, is in Yountville, so due west of here. That is roughly 80 plus acres. And then the Stag's Leap property, 100 acres. We have 110 acres in the Coombsville area. Mm-hmm. Let's see, about 13 plus acres up on Soda Canyon Road, and then 2 30-acre sites in Carneros for our Chardonnay program, one on the Napa side of Carneros, one on the Sonoma side. So it's roughly 400 acres.
It's pretty diverse portfolio.
It's really, really diverse. So, I mean, we're producing everything from Sauvignon Blanc all the way to Zinfandel and Sangiovese. So it's pretty broad.
Yeah, and have fun for you because you get to work with different varietals, different soil types.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's great. And I think that's the other thing that, keeps you coming to work is there's this great diversity. And each vintage obviously is very different. You know, we have still yet to figure out how to control the weather. And so, look at this year as an example. We've gotten so far 40 inches of rain, right?
It's quite wet. Are you worried?
No, okay. I'm not worried because the vines are dormant right now.
Okay.
I mean, the governor of California has declared the drought officially over, so.
Oh, well, good to know.
Yeah.
As evidence would point out, we're sitting again in that really beautiful space. The views are just phenomenal, even in the rain. This bucolic, dreamy kind of a picture. That's your office. That's what you get to look at every day.
Pretty much.
That's pretty inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you sort of, but honestly, I mean, it sort of takes visitors or people that don't come here every day to remind you. Yeah. Because you get caught up in your daily task.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm not out, looking at the vines, and you kind of forget how beautiful it is. And then you have a friend come visit you from somewhere and they're like, you do this every day, and you kind of step back and go, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Lucky me, right?
Absolutely. And I'm now thinking back to 1998 when you stepped into quite large shoes. I mean, there must have been some, perhaps trepidation or certainly awareness that this really is such a significant property and ensuing brand that's been established with so much intent.
Right.
When the family bought it, they clearly wanted to create something special.
Correct.
So how was it for you starting out and taking the reins and continuing that legacy?
Right. Well, so the founding winemaker was a lovely gentleman named Jack Stewart, who also went to Davis and met up with the Millers in the early 1980, and was hired as the winemaker. So in '98, Jack didn't leave. He basically sort of redefined his role, sort of dealing more with the general manager. So he was always here, to consult, and he continued the taste with us as well. So, I certainly had the help if I needed it, and he was right there, and he was always willing to share his insight.
I find it so important. Sometimes when I travel, unfortunately, people have this misperception of Napa Valley that, because it's wealthy and very well known wine country, that people tend to be less collaborative and less forthright. Yeah. And I think that couldn't be farther from the truth.
That's not how it is at all. I mean, I would say it's really the opposite of that. I mean, winemaking as a whole, I mean, you can make wine simply by crushing grapes and leaving a bucket out, and that is going to become wine, right? It may not be great wine, but it's still wine. It's still the process of grapes turning into alcohol. You've just made wine.
Yeah.
So it's not, for people to think that there's some great secret behind this, it's not. Again, it's all process, experience, where the grapes are coming from, how they're handled. I mean, there's a lot of little tiny details that will get you to that end product, which I think differentiates winery to winery. But as far as sharing information, equipment with neighbors, it happens every day. And I would say most winemakers are in tasting groups with other winemakers. They're sharing ideas, they're sharing concerns, problems. You can call somebody if you need a piece of equipment or you've run out of something. People are really here to help because, if we're all successful, everyone does well.
If there's a really great example of the tide lifts all boats sentiment, I think wine country, and specifically Napa, qualifies beautifully for that, because I hear those stories all the time, and I just wanted to emphasize it yet again. Even with someone like you that has such a long and illustrious career, to this day, it's still a collaborative, cohesive effort where everybody, wants to be there for one another and wants to elevate the brand of Napa Valley in this case. Because the better you all do, the better consumers drink, and the better the world is.
Absolutely.
The wine world, for sure.
I mean, think about this. There's so much, when you walk into, say, a general grocery store in California, and you look, there's a wall of wine from all over the place, not just Napa, but California. California alone, there's a wine of wall. So if we can convince the consumer to drink Napa, we've won, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely not a given.
Yeah.
And people like you make a compelling case because, with that depth and breadth of experience, it's hard to imagine that it's anything but top-notch quality. So it becomes really a stylistic decision.
Sure.
And while we're on the subject, curiosity item, as a consumer myself, when I stare at that proverbial wall of wine, which I do, even me, who is, I would like to think relatively sophisticated in terms of just having the wherewithal to discern and having spent, decades in various wine countries, even for me, it can be confusing.
Right.
Do you have any advice to someone that's completely overwhelmed and is staring at all these labels and they all look interesting? How does one choose?
Okay. So again, this is personal, right?
Absolutely,
so,
and mistaken as such.
So you're faced with a wall of wine, and there's some great looking labels and packaging, and of course you can totally get seduced by that, right?
Yes.
But for me, a couple things really stand out. First of all, does it say somewhere on the package, on the bottle, estate grown? Because that's really going to tell you a story, right? That's first saying it is coming just from that property. Or if you generally on the back label, it'll say grown, produced, and bottled. Again, really important story.
I hope you guys are taking notes.
Yeah, yes, grown, produced, and bottled. So all our bottles. Yeah, that is real information. Everything else is just kind of fluff. Yeah. There's so much verbiage on the back label. Some of it's nonsense. Some of it gives you some real information. But, origin, sense of place, grown, produced, and bottled. Those are to me keys that will elevate generally most of the wine, and those will sort of, not always, but those may rise to the top.
Absolutely. Sage advice and taste, right? Taste for yourself.
Don't because
trust
again,
somebody to pick the wine for you.
I think the problem, again, this is my personal opinion. The problem I think with wine is, particularly if you're new into wine, at least there used to be, a few magazines and newspapers that you could read reviews. And those folks had been, trying wines and tasting wines for many years. And so let's say you're a neophyte, you're new to this. You open a magazine, you look, you say, oh, this wine got a very, very good score. You go out, you find that wine, you purchase that wine, and all of a sudden you say, I don't like that wine. So now what happens? Now you think to yourself, I don't like good wine.
Yes.
And so
there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. And so now you're done. So I feel like it's always a journey, and read about wine, study wine. It always makes you a better informed consumer, but don't necessarily trust that somebody else's palate will match yours. And wine is situational. Right? Think about when you go on vacation.
Yes.
And you go to someplace foreign and you buy a great, inexpensive bottle of wine and it tastes fabulous.
Yes.
And you buy a bottle and you bring it home and you go, what the heck? Well, it's because you were on vacation. Of course it tasted great.
Yes.
So,
you brought up such an important piece is context.
Yeah.
It's who you're with, it's where you are. It all influences our perception.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to give yourself an opportunity to get to know your own palate under different circumstances.
Yes.
It's really highly experiential.
Absolutely.
And that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely.
It's now that we've gotten on the subject of wine, I was going to ask you later anyway, so why not go there now?
Sure.
What does Jon drink?
What does Jon drink? When I'm at work or when I'm at home?
Well, let's start with work and then we'll go to your home base.
So when I am at work, we're pretty focused on what we're trying to accomplish either in the day or the week. So it's usually a lot of blend tastings or barrel tastings or kind of maintenance tastings. We will do some commercial tastings, just to kind of see what's out there.
Is it Napa Valley or just worldwide?
Could be worldwide, could be Napa Valley, could be as focused as Stag's Leap, as an example. So, again, because you don't want to live in a vacuum. You do want to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, I call it palate fitness sometimes because it's just the exercise that helps keep you fit.
Right. And what also is really good is, there's basically 3 or 4 core tasters. So it's myself, Ilona, our lab manager, Laura Garsky, and then Russ Weiss, our general manager. And those are generally the 4 that will taste as a consistent group. And each, again, brings a different perspective and a different preference and things. So it's really, I enjoy hearing what people say about wine. So that's my work drinking.
Does it actually influence your winemaking?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I know I have prejudice. I know there's certain things I don't pick up that maybe Elena will be more sensitive to, or there's certain ideas that maybe Russ might have that I hadn't thought about. And so absolutely, I think you have to be dynamic and open when you're making wine.
Very good values. For those of you that met Jon, obviously discovered for themselves. Those of you that haven't, I've always thought of him as exceptionally thoughtful, cerebral, sensitive, active listener kind of a winemaker. And those are the qualities I look for in the wines that I consume. So those are very important, and hearing you validate that further, saying that you always keep an open mind, you don't rest on your laurels, you don't necessarily repeat the same patterns just for the sake of patterns. You actually kind of renew your own perspectives through other people's participation. I think those are all really important qualities.
Yeah, well, again, you have to. Yeah. Because if you think about every August, September, we are given this new opportunity.
Yeah.
And you can ask yourself, you can say, okay, well, this is reminiscent of vintage whatever in the past, but it's really not going to be the same.
Sure.
So you just, again, you have to keep an open mind, and you have to be prepared, and be able to be proactive and reactive sort of at the same time, if that's even possible. I don't know if that's a thing.
It sounds like that's exactly what you do. And again, for the listeners, some of us just are so wedded to the fact that once you're learned, so to speak, enough, that perhaps there's a bit of a default mode. But with Mother Nature, not it's improbable, it's impossible.
Right.
Even if you were to lean that direction. But someone like you, I don't see, even under the best of circumstances and the most favorable vintages, that on paper or on the surface are easy. I can't see you dialing it in under any circumstances.
No, you got to be there. You got to participate. You got to be, sort of boots on the ground.
Yes,
literally.
Absolutely. So I don't want to skip over what you have in your own cellar, because I'm so curious to learn what you drink with your dinner, what you drink on a sad day or on a happy day.
Well, you might be disappointed, but actually when I go home, I don't do a lot of drinking, maybe more so on the weekends, because during the week, I'm tired. My palate's pretty fatigued.
Oh, I bet.
So I will drink water and tea. On the weekends, if we raid our cellar, it may be a good bottle of bubbles.
Nice.
Or depending on what we're eating.
Sure. So it's contextual again.
Yeah, and honestly, I tend to go for maybe a lighter white.
Oh, interesting.
Because again, kind of what my wife and I eat would be maybe more fish or just kind of lighter salads and things like that.
Very good.
So a heavier red just isn't as appropriate. We don't eat a ton of meat.
That makes perfect sense. And do you like to cook?
Okay. I mean, I'm going to say no. Okay. I mean, I don't dislike cooking, but there are other things I'd rather do. So
what do you like to do?
If I had as much free time and income as possible, I would probably go around and watch every spring training and professional baseball that I could find.
We have a sports fan.
I don't know if I'm a sports fan. I like the experience of being at a ball game, eating a hot dog, drinking a beer, and just being out and just watching people at the top of their game playing.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's just fun. I kind of grew up going to spring training. My parents had a place in Arizona, so we used to go out a lot over the breaks and go, when it was like really, really inexpensive, a couple bucks, you could go watch, the Cubs play at Hohokam Park in Mesa and go see Harry Carey, and just, it's just really great memories.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And watching people at the top of their game, I mean, how fun is that?
Yeah.
So if you did not become a winemaker, can you think of any other profession you would have attempted?
Well, my wife is in the arts. She's an artist.
The conclusion of this interview can be found in the next podcast, already available for your download. Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson.